Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the North Norfolk District Council Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 15th of November. And the first item on our agenda is to receive apologies for absence.
I've received apologies from councillors Martin Beattie and Saul Penfold, and no substitutes that I'm aware
Thank you.
of.
Any substitutes this morning? Thank you. Item 3 is public questions and statements. None, thank you. Okay, turning to our minutes at number 4. We can just go through them, please, for accuracy. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. I've seen no hands raised. Can I take it then that you would accept those as an accurate record of that meeting? Okay, can I have a quick show of hands then, please, for that? Thank you. I will sign those off in due course. Item 5, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to today's business? Councillor Holliday.
Yes, I have a pecuniary interest in item 14, but I have dispensation to take part. Thank you.
Yes, that's understood. Thank you. Any others? No, thank you. I'm not aware of any items of urgent business. Thank you. And nor am I aware of any petitions from members of the public at item 7. Thank you. Item 8, consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member. I'm not aware of any. Thank you. And item 9, responses of the council or the cabinet to the committee's reports or recommendations. Are there any to report? No, thank you very much. Then we move to item 10, which is the first substantive item on our agenda, which is the waste and related services update. And today we have 2 representatives from Serco. We have Mr. Peter Haywood and we have Mr. Gary Edwards. So Steve, I don't know whether you want to give an introduction before or whether you want to go straight into Serco.
I think Councillor Ringer was looking to introduce.
Oh, yes, sorry, I didn't spot you there. I beg your pardon. Councillor Ringer, yes, would you like to give us an introduction or?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dixon. Obviously, the report is mostly set out in front of you, so I won't take too much of your time. Obviously, as a new councillor, a new portfolio holder, I started in May. That was obviously off the back of industrial action and some really, really high miss rates. Now that obviously puts additional pressures on staff, and I want to just take a second to pay tribute to the staff here at the council who worked incredibly hard during that period. Thankfully, the situation since then has somewhat improved. Although it's not perfect, certainly in some aspects of the contract, we're now pretty much in line with the industry standard. Still work to be done, but the trajectory is good. There are elevated misses for things like assisted collections. North Norfolk having an elderly demographic means that we do have a higher proportion of assisted collections. That's not an excuse, but it is perhaps a reason why there is additional pressures there. Over the past months, we have introduced small electrical collections, battery collections, and now on the horizon is food waste collections as well. So it's quite an exciting time actually to be part of this team. We have 2 new additional vehicles coming in the pipeline, as you know, to support garden and trade waste. And I suppose finally, just to sum up, is to thank members who very often have brought issues to my attention, and officers who have dealt with those promptly. When I took over in May, my inbox was quite full of issues, and now they are not, which is, you know, perhaps not a scientific way of looking at it, but it's an indication of where we are. And when I go through the street, people used to complain, and now I'm getting compliments about service, be that about the grounds, be that about the barrow operatives in the towns, or their bin men. So, you know, to summarise, it's not quite where we want it, but we are moving in the right direction. So thank you.
Okay. What's the hands?
Thank you, Chair. So, as Councillor Ringer said, the report's before you. I think the main focus for me, I suppose, is that there is a significant and sustained improvement in the collection rates. So I get an update at the end of each day that says these are the number of bins that have been not collected on their scheduled day to day. We used to see that post September of last year, when the new rounds were introduced at a high level, and during the industrial action, obviously they were at a high level. I now see that on a it's the exception now when I see anything that doesn't say 100% complete today. There are still some misses that are going on in there, sporadic misses, but they are, I think, within what no collection system is going to be 100% every single day. There are always going to be some issues that occur for whatever reason. And generally, in terms of our recycling and residual collections, they are now within, if not below, sort of industry standard for misses that you would see each day. As Councillor Ringer has said, there are a couple of areas of attention for us going forward around garden waste collection. Later in the report, I would talk about round and routery optimisation, and garden is one of those areas which will be done. There is a new vehicle coming, and that produces additional capacity that will mean that we can both grow our service in the future if you know, as customers increase, but also means that that can be done in an effective way that doesn't affect performance. The trade customers that we have, again, we have some issues with that, but it's been improving, and the new trade vehicle will enable us again to both reduce some of that pressure on the domestic rounds where their trade collections are done in a co-collected fashion for efficiency, but it will also mean that we've got capacity within our system to be able to grow into the future, and that is one of the areas of focus for us. So I think in terms of collections, things have improved dramatically. I'm conscious of the fact that before, one of the focuses of this committee has been around the inability to contact Serco to report issues. Serco have worked really hard in terms of improving performance in that respect, in terms of their customer contact centre, probably aided by the improvement in service across all 3 parts of this contract. So less people will be ringing in, but we've moved from a position of, you know, below 50% compliance with the required standard in the contract at the beginning of the year, to over 90% month on month, and exceeding the contract requirements. The report talks about the time and speed of answering and the time to resolve calls, and I think, you know, it is testament to the efforts that Serco have put in that we are seeing such good performance in that respect. Councillor Dixon and I conversed very briefly before the meeting in terms of what I've covered the performance of the contract around collections, etc., in quite some detail. Councillor Dixon wanted me to give you an update in respect of the gap analysis, which has been a focus for this, some of which is covered in the report, and probably not in terms of the gap analysis in the way you've seen it before, but I have covered the main issues. So in terms of what is remaining of the gap analysis that was reported to you previously, I think probably about 50% was dealt with through a commercial matters with Serco, and so the three authorities have agreed slightly different ways of delivering it, or that they weren't necessary to be delivered. Effectively, the remaining amount, I would say probably about 60% is probably, about 40% is already delivered. The remaining 60% is in the process of being delivered. Now, although that sounds like we still need to make progress, if you look at it as a list, it's 60%. But if you were to actually look at it in terms of weighting those in terms of importance or large items, the bigger items are all coming forward and going to be delivered. So we'll move very quickly away from 60% to probably more like 20% still, 20-30% still outstanding. And some of those are the very nice to have stuff that, to be honest with you, our focus has been around delivering core services through the industrial action and the pressures of the summer, etc., and the potential changes that are coming through the simpler recycling position. So I think from my perspective, it's in a good position. The community engagement plan, actually, I said in here, it was going backwards and forwards. It's now been agreed at officer level and will be signed off, hopefully, at the next contract review and development board. And the carbon management plan is back with the authorities now for final sign off, and just needs some agreement across the three authorities. So I think in general, we have moved very significantly forwards together, and we are now in a not perfect position, but a far improved position, both in terms of the performance of the contract and also in terms of the elements of the contract that were yet to be delivered. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So we seem to have a full team, I think, for the questions from the floor. We have our two representatives from Serco, and we've got our two in-house. And so I'll open it up to questions. Thank you very much for coming along today, by the way, and welcome to our meeting. So I will open it up to questions. I think I'll take members first, if I may, please. Members of the committee, do you have any questions? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Very glad to hear that we're reducing the number of missed bins. I just wonder if we have any particular areas, particular towns that we're still seeing more missed bins than in other areas.
That one, sorry, apologies. Not used to the system. Not that I'm aware of, but we can go back and check on that specifically. Is there a particular area you think may be the case, and we can look at that? But nothing's come to my attention where you say that's repeatedly happening or that's a particular bad area. We have the hot spots, but there's nothing that stands out on any of that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I represent Wells, which is miles away from anywhere, obviously, and has a very strange area to try and empty bins from, with back alleys and all sorts of things. And I wondered if we just got on top of that. I did meet a chap the other week who was telling me that he'd had a number of missed bins week on week. Not that he'd reported it to me, and he said it had been sorted out, but I just wondered if we were on top of it now.
As far as I know, yes. Is this Wells next to sea? Is it? Yeah. When we go back, we can have a specific look to check, but there's nothing that stands out.
So, and I don't know this for certain, but I suspect that where you have some of those back access, narrow, difficult to get to, you can't get a freighter, normal refuse collection vehicle down there. They are done on what's called a difficult access round, so it's a smaller vehicle. I think probably some of those is the difficult access rounds provide a challenge, I think, to Serco, and is an area that they're looking at and concentrating on at the moment. It's improving, and it has improved, I think, quite significantly recently. If we see incompletions of all of the, where it says it's not 100% complete today, quite often it's like there are, 4 streets and 7 properties that are difficult, down to difficult access, because they do a lot of jumping around. It's not like every property. It'll be 2 down this road, this little bit of lane over here. So it is a big travel time, which makes it a more challenging service to deliver in some respects. So I suspect it might be down to difficult access, but as Peter Elwood has said, we will take that away and have a look. And as ever, what I would say to members, if you have specific issues that come forward, please report them through to Serco so that they can investigate them and make sure the crews are aware and picking those up.
Okay, thank you. I see no other members' hands. Well, I do actually, but I'll take Councillor Toy. He was very.
I'm
quick off
happy
the
to
mark.
go with your members first, Mr. Chairman, but thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. Good morning, everybody. Firstly, I'm grateful to the portfolio holder officers and Serco for moving this in the right direction, and thank them for the honesty of acknowledging that there's still some things that we need to do, but we're getting into a great place. And I hope that we can continue to work on the assisted, because that really is important in Norfolk, particularly in unusual places like Wells, and with myself, 9 rural parishes. It's important that we assist these people. However, my questions, I'd like to move in a slightly different direction. Now we're moving that the right way. Are basically around health and environment. So one is to do with grounds maintenance, and the other one is the thorny question of HVO. So when are we going to go to HVO? That's a simple one. With the grounds maintenance, are we working to reduce the use of pesticides? I have real concerns about the use of pesticides in our environment, and so I'd like to know what we're doing about those areas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for that question. With regard to the pesticides, clearly we are very concerned and make sure that there's very accurate records. So the way that the system works currently is that we're looking to use, weed spraying, weed killer. Then those locations agreed in advance with the council officers. There is a formal record that we retain as well, and it is very specific. So it's not just a wide spray; it's actually a very targeted application, and that's in line with legislation. And again, reducing that impact of using those types of fertilizers, pesticides. There is obviously a lot of discussion about whether there's alternatives out there, and we're looking at those as well. We've recently been invited to a recent trade fair, and again, we're waiting for some of the updates of potentially new products. But from the other things that seem to be readily available out there, we think we've got the best solution, which is the current spot method of applying these pesticides, and that will continue. And again, if there's any concerns about where we've used it, what quantity, there are written records that we can refer to and supply that to any inquiries.
Can I just add to that? So the contract does require Serco to minimise pesticide use, and we know that in a lot of areas they will use, they will hoe, they will use wire brush to remove. There are some places where actually it isn't effective to do that, or the use of pesticides ensures a far better, or weed killer ensures a far better and longevity of service and environment. So it is a bit of a balance between using pesticides in a limited and very targeted manner against ensuring service standards are maintained, and that you are not having a situation. I mean, ultimately, with a lot of weeds, if you cut them off, which is all you do, they come back within a few days. And so you would see a lot more reduction, or a greater reduction in standard, I think, in terms of some of those back lines and areas where you have persistent weeds that are hard to get out from the root.
Very brief, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I think from what I would like to see, but obviously it's for you as a committee to decide, is where we know that we've looked at electric vehicles and we're looking at HVO. I'd like to understand a bit more of what we're doing about the options that are being looked at with pesticides, just a small amount in the report, so that we know that there is work going on there and we're not just sticking with what we've got. Thank you.
I've got councillor Holiday and councillor Housden.
Thank you, Chair. I must say the number of missed collections has gone down, but I do have some persistent calls, missed collections in my area, but I call them into NDC actually because they do a brilliant job of sorting it out. And many thanks to the officers for that. I'm curious about the contact centre data. Does the SLA have anything about actual outcome related performance rather than volume? I mean, are the calls satisfactorily dealt with? They've obviously been dealt with quickly, but is the actual outcome what we're looking for?
Well, the SLA we have in place is essentially that 90% of the calls will be handled within 20 seconds. That's the only metric that's in there. I suppose from the point of view of if it's not handled successfully, the next part of the process is complaints. We haven't seen any specific increase or spike in those at any stage, but it's not something we're contractually measured on.
Councillor Housden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, it's grown to two questions. The first question, we're just talking about the gap analysis. Have we moved away from the target operating model, the TOM analysis we had originally?
So the original gap analysis, and I think this was reported at the last meeting, the three authorities met with Serco to go through a number of issues, one of which was the gap analysis activity. That gap analysis, the authorities went through and said, these are the things that are important to us for you to deliver. These are the priorities in terms of we want you to deliver these first. There were some elements on there that we agreed as authorities and with Serco that were either undeliverable in the way they'd originally been specified or been suggested in their activity. So, for instance, one of the things was an alarm on the in-screen cab when the crew got to an assisted collection. So they had to positively turn off an alarm. That is not deliverable in the software system that Serco use at this stage. And so we said, well, okay, ask your software provider to provide it, but ultimately we recognise it's not going to be feasible to do within the short term. There were some nice to have things. So one of the things that Serco had put in there, that one of the freighters that went round all three districts would have a pothole camera on it to detect potholes that would then be reported in. We agreed that that was, that was an unnecessary deliverable. It would be nice to have, but in the economic climate and with everything else that was going on, we said to Serco, don't provide that. We're not highways authorities. It would have meant having a vehicle that went all round all three districts. It would have been a logistical nightmare. So there were a number of items like that we moved away from.
Okay.
The core things have remained. So the community engagement plan, some of the issues around, delivering WEEE and small WEEE collections and batteries, they stayed on, and we agreed a priority of what they would be delivered to. I'm happy if members would like to provide a copy of that gap analysis in terms of the actual where we are with those things. What that doesn't give you as members necessarily is sort of a weighting in terms of importance.
Right.
So I think in terms of some of the lines, you'd look at it and go, well, there are a load of things that haven't been delivered, but they're sort of this big.
Yeah.
The things that aren't being delivered are big chunky things. And I think that's, I can provide that data and probably give you a bit of a sense of where we are with it. But generally speaking, we are, the things that are of concern to officers in the delivery of the contract and the improvement of the contract are being delivered or are in the process, have been delivered or being delivered.
Fine, thank you. I mean, I'll leave that to you, Mr. Chairman, if you think it would be suitable to have the gap details. Just the final point, is that pesticide glyphosate?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got Councillor Boyle and then Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for the improvement in the service. I live on a difficult access route, and you have been spot on for the last few months, and for that, I thank you very much, and I know other people that are. My question really was about the assisted collections. Having walked the streets of Cromer many times doing bits and pieces, I know how difficult the job actually is for the people that are collecting, and obviously with the route changes, it made it very hard. And I know that there's still difficulties with the assisted collections, and obviously some of that is because the chap is very efficient and goes around and collects the bins, but that doesn't help the guy who I see wandering up and down sometimes looking for where the bins are and aren't correctly marked, because the next week they still won't know where that is. And is there any way you can address that to help your teams?
Thank you. I think there's two aspects to this. From an operational perspective, the first thing was to make sure that the information that the guys have got on their tablets and then is up to date, accurate, and they use it. You'll appreciate with some of the industrial action, we were reliant on a lot of agency support, and subsequently that knowledge that people would have that, about a particular assisted collection, was lacking in some instances. That still remains our focus. As we already alluded to today, it is a high proportion of assisted collections on the collection rounds in general, but it is about refining that information, making sure that that is passed to the frontline teams in order that it's consistent and sustained. It is a challenge, and it still requires more and more focus, and that's something that we're committed to doing.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say it's certainly been a very pleasing improvement in terms of deliveries, and I've certainly had no complaints in my ward in Fakenham. I would like to probe a little bit, if I may, on it said on page 30 of our report, it says further route round reorganisation. It states here that reorganisation you undertook last September hasn't delivered the efficiencies expected, so it looks like you're going to undertake another one next April. Can you just give me an idea of how extensive that will be? Is that a tinkering around the edges, or is that a repeat of what we had last year?
So I think the first thing to say is that the garden rounds need reorganising, so there will probably be quite extensive. So we're increasing the number of vehicles. We paid for a number of vehicles. We've seen growth within our garden subscriber numbers year on year. Those rounds are out of balance and out of kilter and difficult to deliver. So there will definitely be the route and round reorganisation of garden waste. At the moment, there is a fair amount of co-collection of our trade waste service into the domestic rounds. We have purchased the additional vehicle, and Serco will have to move things out of our domestic rounds onto that additional vehicle. And we're looking at growing our trade waste service with Serco's assistance in the future. So there will be rerouting of that. In terms of the recycling and the residual rounds, we haven't had the plans from Serco yet, and following a conversation, so government has now announced the introduction of simpler recycling, which will include the mandatory collection of food waste. From our point of view, we have to look how that happens. It has to be introduced for trade, certain areas of trade business at the moment in the guidelines by April 25. And for residential customers by April 26. We're having discussions with Serco at the moment as to whether we introduce food waste sooner than April 26 for residential customers. And if that's the case, what we will probably do is look at how it is not having a big reroute for residual and recycling rounds in next April. We'll delay it until the following and introduce it in one go, if you like. We are at quite early stages of that, and so we that is literally a discussion that's been happening over the last few days. we haven't got yet certainty in terms of the new burdens funding around food waste, etc. And so there are some dependencies. I think if we were to go in April of this year, the scale of the change would not as big as last time, but it would see a number of changes for people. I think, you know, unless you want to comment about your revisiting it, I think at the moment the likelihood is we might not do, you know, we may not do the change that was planned in or is being planned for in April, in preference of trying to introduce the food waste early for North Norfolk. Yeah, you know, in terms of before the statutory requirement in April 25. But I think the you know, the potential was that it would be a reasonably sizable change in for some, no change for others if it was planned. But I think the likelihood of us moving away from that is increasing as we continue these conversations. But I'm happy if you want to.
No, I think that sums it up. I mean, the trade waste will definitely go ahead in April. The garden waste will definitely go ahead. So we did do the garden waste last year. That was not part of that. So this will be the first time we've done that. So it's in desperate need of that. And with the new vehicles coming through, it's a perfect time to do that. So those two services will be done, and the others are now just in discussion, because with having a reroute, it's quite a disruption for the whole team. It's a disruption for your residents, and it's a really big impact. So we did one last year, didn't go perfectly well. To do one this year, and then to do one in another year is pretty major. So the discussion is, can we sort of hang in and make it work between now and then go then? So that's where we're at the moment.
Thank you, and that's really very helpful indeed. Can I just have a follow-up question, if I may, on the food waste, because you say it's a relatively early days. You intimated there might be some government support for that. I just wonder if you had any idea around the timescales of when you're looking to, when we might get a costed option in that we consider, and we might know something from the government on that, to understand where that play into our budget cycle as well.
I'll ask Officer Martin to give you an update in terms of timescales of the potential funding.
Morning, everybody. Yes, the current understanding is that we will have the capital funding for the introduction of food waste collections by the end of this financial year. Obviously, there is going to be a bit of a rush to market, I would imagine, from the 150 at least local authorities that don't currently have food waste collections, that will all be trying to buy vehicles and containers at the same time. In terms of other funding, we will be receiving what the government term as transitional funding. So costs associated with things like having to reroute things and project management support, those types of costs. And we will, under the new burdens doctrine, receive ongoing revenue support as well. None of the amounts of those different categories of funding are yet known, but we expect them to be communicated to us over the next few months. There is no guarantee that the money that we will receive will cover the full cost of any aspect of our expenditure. The government describe it as they will fund the reasonable costs calculated through modelling that they have done. Obviously, we will do our very best to contain those costs within what the government provide us with. The one question that is unknown as yet is when the revenue funding starts from. Obviously, Officer Hems has just said that we may look to commence domestic food waste collections earlier than is required under the incoming legislation. But it is as yet unclear whether we would qualify for the new burdens funding to start from the date of service commencement or the date at which we are required to be delivering that service. But we will keep an eye on that one.
I think, sorry, just to add to that, I think in terms of the indications from the discussions that have come out of various groups and parties where colleagues from around the county have attended, you know, the indication was that if you went live with a service now, you'd get your new burdens funding, albeit maybe not to today. I think given that that the government position at the moment is that by the 1st of April 26 is a hard date with no wiggle room, it would be very difficult for them to say we're not paying for anything in front of that, because authorities are going to have to introduce service at a time that suits them. And as Officer Martin has said, one of the reasons to look to go earlier than that date is to avoid congestion in the procurement position around the food waste caddies and the food waste vehicles. So I think to answer the other part of your question, which was what's the timeline for getting a plan from Serco? It's a bit of a difficult one at the moment, because it's a conversation we've had. Literally, we asked Serco for some information about 3 or 4 months ago, and they've been working on the background on that. But they've also been working on the efficiency and the effectiveness of delivering the contract. And so we've had conversations over the last, I suppose, 2 or 3 weeks in more detail. And really yesterday we sort of sat down, and then this morning have sat down and had further conversations. So we're at a very early stage of the discussions around not doing this reroute and round change and introducing food in 2025. So I'm hopeful that if we get some of the further information forward from the government announcements, that we can push ahead and probably have some initial indications of what they think it might look like based on collection activity that Serco already do, where they do food waste service for other councils. But also we're looking at the potential for getting some work that was done by a company for the whole of Norfolk that looked at the introduction of food waste, revisited and updated for us, so that we can pass that to Serco, which will aid their modelling. So I think if we can get the modelling updated in terms of what they think the collection or the presentation rate would be, so the amount of food waste that would go out, and using the experience that Serco have over a number of contracts where they deliver food waste, we'll get a good idea, or they'll be able to get a good idea of how many vehicles, etc., time to deliver. But the conversations we had yesterday were, high level of confidence that if we were to move forward with this and say yes, that we could deliver it by April 2025.
Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. Just a point of clarification. Apologies if this has been clarified at previous meetings. Under 3.4, we've got some data about customer contact, and I just wanted some clarification. Where we've got the average speed to answer, is that just through to a switchboard who then direct people onto elsewhere? Is that to a customer services agent? And then the other question is, does the average call time include any waiting time? And then I've got an actual question. I just wanted some clarification on that.
So I think is it 11 or 12 seconds? That's the time from the first it comes through and somebody picks up one of the call center agents. So and they're engaged. They've got within 20. The SLA is 90% of the calls have to be answered within 20 seconds, picked up, and an agent is talking to them. So that's how that's measured.
Okay, and the average call time, does that include the waiting time, or is that the time that somebody's actually speaking to somebody on the phone?
So the call time, the 4 minutes or whatever it is, I think it was now.
Yeah, currently in October.
So that's sorry, yes, I'm the report. So that's once the call's engaged to completing the call, finishing, and that's the 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. The actual question I've got beyond the clarification was, if we look at 2.4, we've talked about industrial happiness, industrial action. My question is about staff happiness, because as a significant employer in the district, without happy staff, we don't get the good level of service that residents expect. And there isn't any data in here about job satisfaction or how our staff feel about working for Serco and the jobs that they do. So if we have that data, or you haven't yet undertaken a survey, I think it would be appropriate for that to come before overview and scrutiny at the next meeting, that this is looked at.
So we do an annual survey within Serco, that's just been completed. So we have the results of that. It's probably fair to say that here in Aylsham, the level of engagement and the response was fairly low. And that's fairly normal experience after a long period of industrial action. If we look at it, so the main industrial action was February, March, but it went on into May. But when did it really start? It started June and July last year. So it's almost a year of that. So that it got quite heated, especially when it was industrial action here. And it takes a while for that to come back to building a rapport with some of the staff. So yes, we know where we are, and we know where we've got to go to get back. But I think it's both parties in that sense. The staff and the management have to work together to improve that.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a question about weed killing. I've got an area in Wales next to sea, which is about as big as this room, bounded on 3 sides with a dwarf wall with 5, I think, seats on it. Each seat has a concrete path up to it. And we're using weed killer to go around the seats and up the sides of the path and around the dwarf wall, which is fine if it was 2 inches wide, but it's now 15 or 18 inches wide outside the concrete paths around the bench seats and around the dwarf wall, which is extremely unsightly when the grass dies. And I'm wondering if this is something we use in the whole of the area, or whether it's just limited to one operative.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, like I said, with glyphosate, it's a very targeted application. We make sure that, again, that is kept to an absolute minimum. You know, the area that you've just described, you know, it's got to make sure that, again, there isn't any further damage to healthy grass and so on. So that's how we'd look at that. I think if there's a case of having to then, you know, cut back to that edge to make it neat and clean, so you've got that definition between the hard surface and the grass area, then clearly that needs to be done, and we can take that away and make sure that that's looked at.
Councillor Fisher, what I'll do is, if you speak to Officer Martin afterwards with the specific details, we'll undertake a quick review as to whether that's the most effective method of doing it there, and whether we ask Serco to deliver that in a slightly different manner. But yeah, we're always happy to look at individual case by case basis of stuff.
Thanks very much. I'll speak to Scott afterwards.
Officer Hems took the words right out of my mouth. Where there are specific issues in your wards, it's really more helpful if you can raise them with the officer team, because they're not really kind of strategic by and large. So, and you'll get probably a better opportunity to go into further detail by that method. I'm going to take the last question now from Councillor Hankins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I live on a mixed-use residential and holiday park. The collection from Serco is excellent on a regular basis. However, the differentiation between waste and recyclable waste is almost impossible for Serco, because there is the discipline of putting the waste into the various bins isn't there. I think what is needed, and I would think this is a problem across the industry. So what is required is a more educational program. Maybe stickers on the side of bins to say, this is what goes in this bin and this is what goes in that bin. It's not there. So they have an impossible job. So the recycling element would be minimal, quite frankly. Whose responsibility is to organise that and get educational program?
So, as a district council, we produce regular or we have produced regular bin calendars. Those calendars include details on the opposite side of what should go into recycling bins, etc. As a partnership with the rest of the Norfolk authorities, so the 7 collection districts and the disposal county as the disposal authority, we have a Norfolk Waste Partnership. We produce lots of information and campaigns through that Norfolk Waste Partnership. So in the past, we've done issues around recycling at Christmas and Easter and targeted times and, targeted themed subjects. So there is a lot of information out there. There is a website that advises people to do so. I think there is, Officer Martin might add to this, but I think there is, opportunities for people to actually say, almost, is this I've got this item, is it recyclable? And the system would be able to tell you, etc. And if it's not at the moment, it's something that I think is coming. We as an authority promote regularly, and we do have in some of those areas where we have challenges over the quality of recycling. We do target, particularly in terms of education and speaking to people. Ultimately, if someone continues to if someone puts the wrong thing in their recycling bin, then effectively Serco will tag it to say it's not going to be collected. So they'll put a red tag in it and we won't collect it until it's been sorted. If that happens regularly, officers will go and visit and say, where we have a real struggle is communal bins. So people who have an individual bin, it's quite easy to target. But if you have a mixed large bin, we don't know who's putting the wrong waste in. So we often see problems of recycling and contamination of recycling in some of those communal bins. But we do an awful lot, and it's an area where we continue to provide focus as an authority to try and do educational campaigns, both ourselves and through the Norfolk Waste Partnership. I don't know whether Officer Martin wants to add anything to that.
Communal bins is a challenge, and I assume that's what is in use at this site. Yeah, we can review the provision. Obviously, the corporate plan and the annual action plan going into next year have got some objectives around educational campaigns, and I'm hopeful that we will have some additional resources to be able to deliver on that. There is certainly a correlation between the contamination of recycling bins, which has gone up in the last few years, and the resources that we've had available to tackle those types of issues. So yeah, it's certainly an area we can look at, and if you'd like to speak to me sort of outside of this meeting, I'm sure we can look at the provision at that site and try and work at improving that.
I mean, what the biggest issue is that the holiday makers come from different parts of the UK that have different recycling requirements. So on holiday, they're not going to look on a website and say, oh, on this particular site, I need to do this, right? It needs to be visible signs that say, put this in that bin, simple as that. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You've raised, I think, an interesting point. It's one that will continue. I think the progress that we have made, though, over the years is measurable, but the challenge will always be there. And your final point, which is basically getting national consistency, I would argue international consistency, actually, when you consider the number of overseas tourists we have, is what we should be striving for. We should be striving for a second nature for all of us across the world, basically. And until we reach that, we will always have that particular problem. But let's not be put off, and let's not be too downhearted about that. Right. Okay. Well, I think we've given that a good hearing. So I have picked up certainly one, I think, request for that information to be circulated with regard to the gap analysis. That's the target operating model gap analysis. For newer members, that may not make a great deal of sense, but I hope you can, if you're able to circulate that, we'll cover a sort of a recommendation in a moment, but just thinking about the mechanics of this, if you were to circulate something like that, it would need, I think, a little explanation, a little introduction on what the target operating model is and how that gap analysis has been arrived at. And also you mentioned quite importantly, I think, about the weighting of certain items that will help make more sense of those figures that you gave us. That 60-40 and then that 80-20, I think will be very helpful. So I think that was the proposal, Councillor Housen, that you raised. I don't know whether we have a seconder for that, Councillor Cushing. So I think with that additional what we've got before us in terms of recommendations is the first one to ensure that members of the committee have opportunity to consider how the contract is performing and to understand trends around the key performance indicators. And I think we've done that. And the second one is to allow further consideration of contract performance in the future. And I think that would be what I would say is a valid item to propose. I think there are some longer term issues which we've discussed, which we probably will want to consider at a different point along the way. They may even be capable of being included in portfolio updates to full council. So let's consider that as well. So okay, would you be then supportive of a recommendation that the gap analysis together with supporting information be circulated to members after this meeting? That would be, I think, probably the simplest way of doing that. So I've got a proposer and a seconder. Can I have a second, a show of hands, please, on that addition to the second recommendation? Okay, thank you. And are you all supportive of the first recommendation as well? Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. Right, that concludes that matter. Thank you very much indeed to Mr. Elwood and I've forgotten his name. That's the one. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed for coming along today, and we'll let the matter stand for the time being, but we'll keep it all under review. Thank you. Yes. Yes. So item 11 on our agenda. I'm not sure whether yes. I was going to say, I think they need to come up at the top here, yeah. Item 11 on our agenda is the Anglian Water Sewage Outflows briefing, and we've got two guests this morning. We have Grant Tufts, who is the Regional Engagement Manager, and Natasha Kennedy. Kenny, is that right? And you are the Head of Quality, Regulation and Enforcement, is that right? Thank you very much. Welcome to our meeting today. Right. In preparation for the meeting, we did invite questions from members, and those questions have been put to Anglian Water, and responses have been given. So, Councillor Fredericks.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much for your indulgence. Chairman, those letters, those questions and answers, I feel need to be in the public realm, because obviously this is a public meeting and we're being accountable to our constituencies. So I feel that those questions and answers need to be put on our website and published.
Yes, I think that will happen by due process in any event. So, but you raise a very good point. So for the purposes of this meeting, I have to say that they haven't been circulated, and perhaps that is a shortfall, because clearly members of the public looking in will not be aware of what they are. So it's a very valid point. Thank you for raising that. But we are where we are. We can put that right in terms of putting them on the website. So I'm not sure whether do I have any cabinet member wanting to do any introduction on this? Councillor Adams, do you wish to or not?
That wasn't on the agenda, so I hadn't planned to. It wasn't something that we have any. Sorry. I don't think so, Mr. Chairman. If we move on and let them introduce themselves, thank you.
Yes, by all means, yes. Mr.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members and visitors. So this matter has been brought to the Scrutiny Committee because it was the subject of a motion to full council, I believe in November or December 2021. There was then a presentation received by this committee, I think in May or June of last year, and this is a follow-up to that issue. The issue of Anglian water investment and infrastructure and pollution incidents from wastewater is something that has been of concern to members of this council, not least around the issue of us losing 3 blue flags from the 6 that we had earlier this year. So we saw a loss of blue flags at East Runton, Munsley and Sea Palling, around which there was public concern because of the importance of tourism to our local economy and our communities. Clearly, there has been a wider national context around water quality and the investment by water companies, not just Anglian Water, but there is increasing public or heightened public interest in this matter. And I believe it's helpful that the 2 representatives from Anglian Water have attended committee today to make best use of time. As you said, Chairman, there were a series of questions asked from members, submitted in advance, and answers have been prepared in response to those to make best use of time. I would encourage you to ask whether there's any follow-up questions to those responses, if any of those members feel that they have supplementary questions, and then move to other questions if you were so minded.
Well, thank you, Mr. Blatch, for that. Yes, I think it certainly would be most, I think, efficient in terms of use of time. If you've got any clarifications that you'd like to ask around those questions, and if you have any other questions which have not been covered around this particular topic. I'm aware that one of the questions related to water supply, and water supply isn't actually part of this brief at the moment, although the question was valid and has been answered. I don't want to venture into other areas because there are other areas of Anglian water operations, I'm sure, that could take us all day. So we need to keep it reasonably tight, I think. So questions then in terms of clarification to the questions and answers that have been given. Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming. Grant and Natasha, it's very kind of you to come along. I had a question about, obviously about Holt, and I have asked you this, and you'll probably answer it when you come to our parish council meeting next month, for which we're very grateful. But you say that you're going to notify us of, this is answer 2, about the storm events or the pollution events. But my question was specifically what is in the effluent that's coming down the river? So it was what wasn't just that there was an event, but what's actually in the water as a result of the event. And I don't think it's quite answered there. Thank you.
So we do have a water recycling centre at Holt, as you are aware, and we also have, so that will discharge continuous final effluent to the watercourse. That works also has a storm overflow, and we've provided information in relation to the compliance status of that works. So those 2 separate discharges to the environment are permitted by the Environment Agency, and those permits will specify the conditions by which those discharges need to comply with. those conditions are set in order to ensure that the ecology of the receiving watercourse is protected and doesn't cause harm. We haven't provided the contents of what's in the final effluent, and we don't have a requirement to monitor storm overflow discharges, as in sample them, because they are very low or no impact discharges as long as they comply with the conditions of their permit. So we do have a requirement to record and report the number of times they discharge to the environment, but not sample them. The continuous final effluent discharge to the from the water recycling centre is the treated discharge that runs through the sewage treatment works. We do have a requirement to sample and test for certain parameters because they are specified in the permit. I'm afraid I don't have them to hand today, but I will be able to forward them on. But the type of things that we have to sample for is suspended solids, ammonia limits, and the biological oxygen demand, because those are the things that could have a detrimental impact on the ecology of the receiving watercourse. I'll be able to provide you a full set of the permit parameters for Holt, and also the results of those tests and of the samples that have been taken over the last 12 months.
Just to add on that, Councillor Holiday, so obviously the storm overflows should operate in storm conditions. So as I think we said in an email conversation, the predominance of the discharges is rainwater. So it's very highly diluted, and also that water is going into probably a river that's already in spate or through storm conditions already. So it's already going into water courses already diluted as well. So I think, as Tasha said, the content of sewage is very small, and it's within the permit anyway. So we're very confident that there's no environmental harm. If that discharge was to occur without a storm condition, then that would be considered as a pollution, and we would absolutely investigate that, and we would do sampling and get some tests done on what happened and what that discharge was what included. But we haven't had any of those in Holt, I think, for many years, so confident in that.
Councillor Hankins and Councillor Fredericks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Anglian Water, for providing us with your update and explanation of what you are proposing. In the capital, I'll refer to it as capital plan, you talk about £200 million investment in reducing the activation of storm flow over the Severn, with a view to having this complete by 2030. Is that correct? I mean, that's a long way off. Is there any staggered programme of improvement that you can allude to? Because I think we all agree that capacity is the major problem here. You can monitor and whatever, but unless there's a capacity to treat it, then, and this particular paragraph refers to that, but it's pretty broad.
So thanks for the question. We do have a programme of work. We work in 5 yearly periods, and that is the way in which we work with Ofwat and the Environment Agency to plan how we are going to deliver our programme of work. We the end of this 5-year programme is in 2025, and then the next one is 2030. Okay. So we do talk about things that will be delivered by 2030, but we won't all deliver them then in that last year. We will deliver them as an incremental programme. So at the moment, we are delivering a programme of work that's a 5-year period of 2020 to 2025. And some of that programme of work has been agreed with the Environment Agency and Ofwat, and it is carrying out storm overflow improvements already. So we currently have 165 schemes that are being delivered between 2020 and 2025. So those schemes include increasing the amount of flow that we are going to be keeping in our system and passing it forward to our water recycling centres for treatment, and also putting storm storage tanks in our catchments so that we retain more storm water both of these types of schemes reduce the number of storm overflows that are discharging to the environment. So as I said, we've got 165 schemes that have been planned within this 5-year period. 115 of those have already been delivered, and 65 of them were delivered earlier than the original obligations requested by the Environment Agency. Again, by the next 5-year period, we are going to be delivering further storm overflow improvements, but they will be staggered between 2026 and 2030.
Is the 5-year plan available to view?
We've got, this 5-year plan is available. The next year.
Yes, we published our proposed plan, 5-year plan from 2025-2030. £9 billion is in that plan, biggest ever by a long way in Anglian Water's history. So it's on our website. You can search for a business plan. It's 2025-2030, and it sets out our ambitions for that 5-year period, and where we want to invest your money as bill payers in those schemes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You raise a good point, Councillor Angus. There's another important strategic dimension to that. And that is that, yes, we can address capacity, but actually the higher level problem here is that we're not retaining water, rainwater, surface water for other needs across the nation, across our district, which is quite dry. And if we were able to actually take out of the current flows the fresh water and store that for use, we would be far better off. So I have to say that there is a downside, if you like, to just focusing on increasing capacity, because you are ignoring another problem. That other problem is biting us already. And so we need to address that as well. But that's another matter another day. I've got Councillor Fredericks and then Councillor Blathwaite.
Hello, thank you so much for coming in, and thank you for allowing the question. So I'll take you back to Mothering Sunday this year, when the pumping station at Munsley overflowed again because of a fault. And I spent Mothering Sunday wading around in effluents on our seafront. My issue is that although the water was testing, because it's the sea, was testing clear 2 days after the event, the land was not. So the hard standing around the pumping station and the apron, the concrete apron, was not. It was still contaminated, but you wanted us to open the beach on your readings. Now, has there been any lessons learned about sites such as the pumping station at Munsley or other pumping stations that have hard standing around them, which is in fact infected by the sewage that comes up on these unfortunate events?
Thank you, Councillor Fredericks. Yeah, I remember that Mothering Sunday well. We were obviously in conversations and all sorts of things going on at the time, and it was an unfortunate incident of a cracked sewer pipe on that pumping station. So, yes, hands up, we actually, let people down on that occasion, and I'll put it right since. And you mentioned lessons learned. We have had an internal review of that lessons learned from that incident, and I think at the time there was a debate about whether we should clean or not clean part of that area, mainly because nature that does take its course a lot of time in sunlight does deteriorate the pathogens on hard standing surfaces. But I think in the end of the day we did end up cleaning that area and also replacing all of the shingle, as I recall. So I think that as a lesson that we've picked up and probably understood people's perceptions and expectations is probably different than ours. So that's absolutely taken on board, and within the lessons learned, we would absolutely do that a bit differently next time.
That's really good news, and I'm hoping that an action plan is given to the engineers that actually go to the scene, because the engineer there, bless him, didn't have a clue, didn't have a torch. So I'm just hoping that these instructions and what to do is maybe on the pump house itself. And also I want to address the blue flag issue. So the blue flag we lost in a period of drought. It was not down to storm surges. But recently in the press, because you've been testing, you're saying, along with the MP, that it was down to bird fouling. So the testing has been going on for 2 years, but at that point in time when we lost our blue flag, which was devastating to the people of Mundsley, to be fair, I don't feel it was properly investigated at that point. So naturally, when we've had years of torrential rain, which we've had for the last couple of years, the results are going to be different. So we feel as a community that we would like our blue flag back, please, because it's nothing that we've done. But I feel that we've been kind of robbed in a way of our blue flag status. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you for that question again. To point out, obviously, blue flags are not Anglian Water's responsibility. It's the Environment Agency monitoring that just declares whether a beach is adequate or good or excellent to become the blue flag. Obviously, we're a factor amongst many other things, and I think you pointed out about the issues maybe further up the coast around Heacham that we'll be talking about with that MP about the bird issue, which is on record and factually correct from independent analysis. The thing with blue flags, what it takes, unfortunately, the process, again, it's an Environment Agency process. It's a 4-year rolling programme. So obviously, once you've lost the blue flag, you need to have clear, excellent status for a while to get it back. Now, the hope is, looking at our investment, which is in the question, of the answer to question 2 in your pack, that we are investing about £2 million to reduce the storm overflow discharge rates at Mundsley. So hopefully by the 2027 season, that blue flag should come back, all well and good. From our point of view, in terms of the impact of storm overflows as a point, but obviously there are other factors that can influence that blue flag too. And there are other sources which, again, we all need to work together on to try and mitigate things like, say, the seaweed, there's birds and other pollutions that get into the sea. So yeah, our ambition is to try and help Mundsley get its blue flag back by 2027.
I think
Thank you. Very pleased about that.
I could just add to that. We are very much driven by science, and we will carry out investigations to understand the root cause of issues. And as you say, there are many different factors that can cause impact on bathing waters. It could be down to weather, tidal influence, and actually what's being input into that bathing water as well. So we are learning all the time, and we are applying that learning. We've got a really good coastal team who support in understanding why bathing waters may be not achieving their excellent status, and they will carry out modelling and testing to understand sources of what might be causing that impact. So but yes, as I say, we are learning all the time, and we are implementing that learning to understand the cause. But it is very important that we are addressing the root cause of the problem. So we are doing our bit with the storm overflows and improving in that area, but there are other sources of issues in these regions that also need to be addressed, because it needs to be a collaborative effort to get that back up to its standard.
Okay, I suggest, in regard to the action plan that you've mentioned, if you feel that that's not an adequate action plan, then in my experience, Grant Tufts is a contact there that will be very useful to you, and I'm sure he won't solve it himself, but he'll know a man who will. So please use that route if you feel that that's not happening. Right, Councillor Brathwaite.
Thank you very much, Chair. Lovely to be back here, by the way. I haven't been back since I became portfolio holder, but I enjoyed the 4 years I sat at your feet. Right. Regarding seawater quality, there hasn't been, as I understand it, a massive amount of explosion in bird life or animal life, for that matter, in the North Sea. Environmental Agency DNA testing, I agree, has found has found a certain level of other animal type pollution, but it also found chicken DNA in the North Sea. And I would suggest that was because it was passed through humans before it was passed, it became, chickens became a seabird. I personally have a certain amount of cynicism regarding the pollution source in the North Sea. And I believe it is very much human. And it's being discharged not only on storm events, but I think it has now been documented that it's dry weather events as well, which are, I understand, illegal. And actually another question I have, we've been suffering in my part of the world and from the chairman's part of the world, a high level of flood and overtopping of river banks. And this is, I understand, has affected sewage drainage from those low-lying communities. And I'm worried that this is not a single event, but is likely to become much more common. And is Anglia Water confident that it can cope with the sewage and the amount of river water flood as well? And my final question is very much with my Broads Authority hat on, Knackerswood. Is there any plans regarding Knackerswood water treatment to improve its efficiency and its capabilities, as this is now a real drag on developments in the villages that use that facility? And yeah, I'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you for questions. I've not heard of sea chickens either. So it's interesting that we are finding DNA, chicken DNA sources in the sea. Again, we would need to be investigating where that chicken is coming from, where the root cause of that issue is, and why that it has been found in the sea. So that is something that we will be working with the Environment Agency on to understand. Is that because of a misconnection of a sewer pipe that has gone straight out to sea? Is that being dumped from sea from other areas? Is that coming from our discharges? And that is something that we would work with the Environment Agency on to understand where that is coming from. So that is something we would need to work more closely on. I'm afraid I don't have any specific details. I've not seen that DNA results personally, but if you'd be happy to share it, I could take a look at it with our coastal team so we can look in a bit more detail.
It was in the report given to the Norfolk Coastal Forum, the meeting in, that would have been July. Yeah, it would have been from the, it can be gathered from Norfolk Coastal Forum minutes, and the meeting was in July. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we'll take that away as an action and have a look into it and come back. Thank you.
And then on yeah, the flooding point, I think yeah, you're quite right. Is the Storm Babette, and then obviously for us as well, Storm Kieran, and more recently even Storm Debbie. These becoming more frequent events, and it affects us as much as everybody else in terms of our performance and our assets. Safe to say that our assets are performing as they should in terms of in North Norfolk. So they are, you know, they're operating, but unfortunately they are simply overwhelmed with the surface water and the overtopping of the rivers, as you mentioned. Into what we're doing about that, well, we have massive investment, which I've mentioned earlier in our business plan in the next 5 years. A lot of that is climate mitigation investment. to protect our assets, to make sure they do perform when these incidents are occurring more and more often. A good example of that, for instance, just down the coast at Lowestoft, we recently finished a scheme, £4.7 million of moving a couple of sewer pipes 500 metres inland from the coast, because they were going to be basically smashed to bits by the coastal erosion down there. So it is a real impact now. And we are spending a lot of money. And again, in our business plan, if you look for our business plan, look around climate change and mitigation, there's a lot of money, hundreds of millions of pounds in the next 5 years to tackle the climate change impacts on our assets and performance. Obviously, that doesn't solve everything, because the storm rivers overtopping, getting into systems isn't an easy fix. So it's not just our drainage network; it's the surface water system, the highway system, all get overwhelmed as well. And unfortunately, people in low-lying areas do suffer from that. So again, it's back to the multi-agency approach. And I know Norfolk has that amazing Norfolk Flood Alliance that's set up by Lord Danner and now chaired by Henry Cater. We're very much part of that, and I know some of the local MPs as well have created sort of more hyper-local flood risk groups. I know George Freeman in Mid Norfolk has done the Mid Norfolk Flood Partnership as well. So I think we're always at the table at those meetings and those collaborative sort of coming together to try and find solutions. It is such a complex thing, flooding, as you can all appreciate. But we do all we can, and we try and invest where we can protect our assets and that will protect customers. The Knackers Wood Point is a good case in point. Obviously, people in the room might know about the impacts of that, particularly around Horning and Hoveton and the villages and the Broads. There is a plan that I've just had a quick look. There's nearly £2 million worth of investment planned the next 5 years at Knackers Wood to cope with growth and allow that. We still have a position statement with the EE and the local planning authority about development there, because of the fact that it does overtop often the Broads. I've been there many times and seen it. In fact, got some photos just recently of where that is. We're still working on a sort of a solution, collaborative solution for Horning, particularly. With flooding, trying to install a pump and get some sort of collaborative work with the Highways HC and the residents, because again, it's water that's coming over from the river and the Broads that's flooding. I think Ferry Road in Horning particularly it suffers. But yeah, in terms of Knackers Wood, we're working hard, and we have regular catch-ups with our own agency on that compliance point, because we're not compliant on that works, because it's basically pumping and treating river water, which it shouldn't be doing because of the infiltration. And unfortunately, a lot of those villages and towns are very, very low lying, and the Broads is rising. So, it's a perfect storm. So, but yeah, we are committed to try and do all we can to protect those communities. But again, we need everyone's support and help to do that as a collaborative group of organisations, and the Flood Alliance is the best way to do that.
Okay. Thank you. I've got 4 more on the list, and I'm closing the list at that point. So I've got Councillor Toy, Councillor Housden, and I've got Councillor Heinrich, and I have got, I'll come to that in a moment. Anyway, just you go ahead, Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Can I go back to the question around the investment and the huge money you're putting in? Are you taking due regard to future development plans? Because we have a new local plan that's going ahead. And obviously with that, whilst infrastructure is not included, that you will get runoff from roads and any industry that comes along potentially later. So it's not just about the houses. And is all that money delivering new stuff, that investment, or have we got hidden in there the upgrades that would have had to have happened anyhow? And having said all that, why is it that apparently we're struggling, with outflows and things now, when it's my understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, that the population has only increased by about 500 over the last few years. So we've not had a huge population increase. However, we seem to be having more events. So did we not invest enough in the past? And are we going to invest enough in the future to future-proof, not to always be catching up? Hopefully that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. That's a very good question. We get asked this a lot. You can understand across our region. We go and talk to scrutiny committees like yourselves, and yeah, growth is a big factor in our region. It's the second fastest growing region in the UK after London. We're very mindful of that, and we do forward plans. So we are consultees for local plans. So the local plan you mentioned, our spatial planning team will be looking at that and feeding back comments and inputting into that plan with our recommendations and the requirements we might need from those allocations that are going to come forward. What we're not is statutory consultancies for actual planning applications, even though that's in the Water and Planning Act. It hasn't actually been enacted yet. So as part of Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act, it states that water companies should become statutory consultees to help local planning authorities with those decisions about growth. So until that's enacted, we're still on the edges of that process. We do add in comments and recommendations and ask planning authorities to put conditions on planning applications if we think they're going to have an impact on our assets or on pollution or water resources. But ultimately, it's the LPA that has that final decision based on all the evidence they get put. And so obviously they've got to deliver the plan, but we want them to deliver it in a sustainable way. So if that act changes, we'll have a much more of a say in those local plan decisions and those planning applications where we will have a right to sort of stop people automatically connecting to our infrastructure, which they do now. In terms of the sort of planning forward in terms of our assets, and absolutely we do that. So the outcome of those local plans will be put forward into our business plan, and we would upgrade and monitor those impacts in terms of growth on our infrastructure, and we would find funding to allocate to where those are. So there are some growth schemes in that plan that we talked about in the next 5 years. Your point about the low level of growth and the impact of that we're seeing is really climate change and action. It's that the storm frequencies we're seeing, we probably wouldn't have predicted, 5, 10, 15 years ago when we were first doing these plans, which is why we have what's called a long-term delivery strategy as well. So another report if you want to have a bit of light reading, but it's on our website too, and that's a 25-year look ahead plan, and within that is much more detailed around our mitigation options around climate change, what we need to do as a business to prepare for the future, because the 1 in 100 storm is now a 1 in 30 storm, which will be a 1 in 5 years. So these things are happening. I just mentioned the 3 storms recently. So we are absolutely need to be agile and on the front foot to try and help mitigate the impacts of those climate changes on our region. I mean, the chair mentioned not talking about water, but water resources is even more of a challenge for us, running out of water. So I know we're not here to talk about today, but we'd happily come back and talk about that at some point, because we know how vital that is for Norfolk particularly. So again, running out of water is definitely on our horizons to try and mitigate and find some sources of water for the future growth of the region.
I could add a little bit to that as well. You asked as well about the how the investment is separated out. So when we talk about the funding that we're putting in relation to storm overflow improvements, this isn't about us maintaining our existing system. This is about us delivering enhancements to the so we're actually going to be reducing spills. If we did nothing and just maintained, those storm spills would continue to increase. But actually what we're doing is we're investing to reduce those storm spills to the environment. I guess one of the other points I just wanted to raise was the fact that we talk about the Anglian region being the driest region in the country, and actually that is reflected in our storm overflow spill numbers. If you compare the Anglian region to the rest of the country, we had the lowest number of spills in 2022 compared to the rest of the rest of the country. So that is reflected in the fact that our data is reflecting our climate. But we are looking to continuously improve and drive down those spill numbers further, so that we can actually deliver that requirement that our customers would like to see fewer spills to those receiving environments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The thrust of your question, I think, can be equally addressed to other infrastructure agencies and indeed councils, tier 1 and tier 2. So we're all kind of engaged, I think, in that big picture, and the ability to predict and to do that crystal balling bit. And I'm not talking about right now, I'm talking about, decades past, because that's the kind of notice that you need. It hasn't happened, and we all, I think, to one extent or another, bear some responsibility for that.
I agree, and that's why we need to build in some headroom and not just meet what we see as a predicted demand, because we know that it's changing quicker than we've been predicting in the past. But and I agree with you on the water point, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Housden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to just focus a little bit on rivers and the point you've just made about spills. I do understand that Anglian Water is one of 6 companies who underreported their spills in the last period. And in fact, in 2022, you had 11 of the worst sewage incidents in the country. So therefore, it's a matter of confidence. In the answers to the questions, Ofwat approval is mentioned 6 times. So although you've talked about the budget and everything for 2025 to 2030, that's still down to Ofwat approval. And given that level of spills, I have the Wensum going through my ward, and I actually live 400 yards off it, which is a triple SI and SAC. And I'd like to be given confidence that after decades of lack of investment, there is going to be serious investment that is going to protect not only the Wensum, but the other 5 major chalk streams in this country, because it is quite clear from all of the press over the last year that Anglian Water, amongst other water companies, have actually been failing in protecting the natural environment. So I would like you to tell me where the confidence is going to come from, given that at the moment you're waiting for Ofwat approval for the expenditure and the projection of these schemes, and how rivers like the Wensum are going to be protected. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I guess there's 2 ways in which we report data to the Environment Agency and publish it on our website. So our storm overflow spill reporting, we achieved 100% of our spill reporting to the Environment Agency. So that was 100% compliant with its permit conditions. The area that I think you are referring to is the self-reporting of pollutions. Now, that is a slightly different category. So what happens is, if we have a pollution in our area, if Anglian Water report it to the Environment Agency, it's noted down as self-reported, whereas if it's reported by a member of the public, it's not logged as a self-reported incident. It's still reported, but it's coming from a third party. Now, the Environment Agency measure us on how many of our pollution incidents we self-report, rather than them coming in from a member of the public. Obviously, we don't want to have any pollutions at all. If we have a pollution, we want to be the ones that know about it first. So we do encourage members of the public to tell us about it so we can get out there as quickly as possible. But also we want to have that information out there. We've got lots of monitors out there telling us when our what's happening in our network. We haven't done as well as we'd hoped in 2022, and that is reflected in our environmental performance assessment figures. So we didn't feel as though we reported enough ourselves that came in from third parties more than Anglian Water, but we are putting in intelligence and data science in order for us to have a better visibility of our sewer network, so that figure will improve, and we can see it's significantly improved this year already. We're also installing 22,000 additional monitors throughout the Anglian region, so we get more information about what's going on in our catchments, so that we can be more proactive and stop these pollutions from happening before they do. But also it will give us that information so we can get out there, we can self-report and get to that 100% self-reporting figure that we're aiming for. So it hasn't been as good as we hoped, but we are improving this year.
And just to pick up your investment point about a business plan, yeah, you're quite right. It's the plan we published is our proposed plan that we want to deliver from 2025 to 2030. All water companies have to publish it a year ahead. This basically gives a year consultation and discussion a negotiation, if you like, with Ofwat, a regulator, and that's going to happen from now until next Christmas, when this time next year, maybe in December next year, the Ofwat will declare what the final determination of that plan is, and then we enact that plan from April 2025. It's financial year driven. So as I said before, £9 billion is by far the biggest investment proposal we've got. Whether that reflects the lack of investment in the past, I don't know. I think there's our current plan's about 6 billion. There's still lots of money that we're investing. The point being is that the Ofwat, as our economic regulator, have to balance the cost of bills against what Anglian Water can charge and what we can invest, and the same for all water companies. And so that's a tricky balance to take, cost of living, everything else. So bills historically maybe have been kept quite low. If you compare your water bill to energy bills, for instance, it's I think your bill's now about £1.45, £1.50 a day per an average per household, which is a fraction of energy bills for all the water and water recycling services you get. So our proposal for our next 5-year period is going to put that up by about 15% across the 5-year period, which is quite a modest increase compared to some other water companies. You can do your own research on that. Anglian Water, I think it's a fair and balanced plan, weighing up the investment we need to deliver the environmental improvements that Sasha's talked about, but also to keep bills moderately manageable for customers. Alongside that bill increase, there's also additional support for people that generally can't afford or are struggling. So there's a whole new tariff, some new tariffs, and particularly on medical support as well for people that need water for medical purposes. So we're trialing and having a first tariff in the industry on that topic. So be very, very conscious of supporting customers in need, but equally we need to spend your money as best we can in trying to improve those environmental issues that you've raised this morning. So I think, going forward, you can take it from today that our ambition is big, but it needs to be big because there's a lot to do, and we want to make sure that we deliver it as best we can to benefit customers and the environment. And it all depends on what the outcome of our negotiations and discussions with Ofwat are in the coming year.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, sorry that you alluded to a point there. Is there a cap on the amount that you can invest and charge? I mean, that seemed a bit strange, given that out of the dividends, 169 million went out to investment pension funds in Abu Dhabi and Canada and Australia. So are you capped as to the amount that you can invest? Does Ofwat impose a level investment you're allowed to commit?
There's no figure. It's Ofwat take all of our plans in the round and decide whether or not that we can deliver what we want to do for that amount of money. So they assess our plan against other plans and other needs in the country, and we get then to a conclusion about what we're allowed to invest. I think a lot of our customers and our stakeholders we talk to, I think you're alluding to it, want us to invest more, but unfortunately that would mean more higher bills, customer bills, because invariably bill payers pay us, and we then invest that money in our plans. I mean, in effect, the money that we're going to be investing from 2025 comes from our owners. So that £9 billion is put forward and put into the Anglian Water from our owners and our shareholders, and then to invest in all of those schemes and all that activity for the 5 years. And then obviously those assets are then paid, that's paid back to those investors over the life cycle of those assets over 5, 10, 15, 20, sometimes even 100 years. So that's how the model works. So customers don't pay up front for the investment. They pay back the investment that our shareholders have put into the scheme, into the business.
Okay, fine. All right, Mr. Chairman, I won't pursue that anymore, but thank you very much.
Mr. McDonald.
Hi. Councillor Frederick's already preempted most of my question because I'm the neighbouring ward. So most of it was about the blue flag, etc. at Monsley. But at Gimmingham, where it's my ward, can you tell me where in the schedule the improvements are for the treatment at Gimmingham? Are they going to be?
If it's a ward level, is it a ward level consideration only?
Yeah, well, it's the same question as Councillor Fredericks was most. But Councillor Fredericks' question kind of took most of my question away. It was the treatment from Gimmingham and when they're going to get.
Yeah, no, I found it now. So I was
Thank you.
looking through my notes. So I
Thank you
found
very much.
Gimmingham. Yeah, so we spoke to our maintenance manager who looks after Gimmingham pumping station, and we do show that there was a storm overflow discharge from that site twice in 2022. And there is investment being planned for more monitoring on that site. So we're not aware of any other issues pertaining to Gillingham particularly. So, but our maintenance manager assures us, and we've checked it with him before the meeting, that it's all working as it should currently.
Thank you.
Okay.
And finally, Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really following on from Councillor Toy's point on future plan development. North Walsham would be the major growth area within North Norfolk, 2,150 homes potentially over the next 15 years. I'd just like to seek assurances that you have the plans in place to upgrade the sewage works there, which impacts not only in discharges into the Dilham Canal, which is totally unsuitable water course. It doesn't have any flow to it. And secondly, a lot of stuff goes via Gillingham and ends up on Munsley Beach. So it's a much wider impact than just North Walsham. Secondly, as to whether you have investment plans in place to upgrade the water supply in town. We have 2 water towers built for a population of 5,000 many years ago. Really need assurances that that the borehole can cope. Secondly, we won't need another tower somewhere because planning issues there, which I'm somewhat involved with. I have to say my confidence levels are low, given that we're still waiting after 5 years for the surface water flood mitigations in the Linfield Road area of the town. So, you might have had plans there, but nothing's happened. Given that we've got the development coming along, I'd like assurances that we are planning for it and it is actually going to happen. Thank you.
I think your second question, if it purely relates to water supplies.
It does, yeah.
Is out of scope.
Okay.
So first question.
So we do work closely with the council growth teams to understand where growth is predicted around our region. And then we do make an assessment of how that growth may have an impact on our ability to serve that particular area. We have a long-term drainage water management plan that has been developed with our drainage water management plan expert in the business. So they look at what's happening within the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 30 years. So we're looking up to the next 50 years to see where is that growth planned and actually how much will that growth impact on our ability to serve those particular areas. If we do have growth in a particular area, what we do is we look at the load of what that growth is likely to have on our receiving treatment works, and we also look at the volume of flow that is likely to generate. And then those 2 assessments are used to calculate whether the network is capable of taking that volume to the receiving treatment works, and then whether that treatment works is capable of treating that additional load. If the answer is no to either one of those questions, then we will invest to improve the works. But the first thing we have to do is we have to go to the Environment Agency to say, we know that there are X number of houses to be built in this area. Therefore, our flow to this particular works is going to increase. So therefore, the flow to the receiving river or sea is going to increase. And then the Environment Agency will come back to us and they will change the standards or the conditions of our permit so that we don't then cause detriment on that receiving watercourse. And then the decision made by the Environment Agency on what those changing permit conditions are will drive what we then need to do to invest in that site to make sure we can deliver those improvements to the discharge to the watercourse. So that's how our approach works. So we will have done that for that particular growth area.
Okay, thank you. So the answer is maybe, depending on, we'll see. Thank you.
I think on your second question, if you want to take that up, I think I'm sure AW will be more than happy to have a separate discussion with you.
I'll leave that to our planners to
The water, we can answer the water resource question now if you want to, councillor.
Well, I'm just thinking of
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
actually. We need to draw, I think, this to a conclusion. I wonder if you would be comfortable to note the progress of the report that's been given today. And I don't know what you want to do in terms of any future consideration, whether you want to consider this progress report at a future date, maybe in 12 or 18 months. That's a matter for you. What's the feeling? I'm getting a nod from Councillor Fisher.
You're not going to know the outcome of the Ofwat until December next year, is that right?
No, but we'd be willing to come back and sort of, next middle of next year to sort of talk about progress, because I'd like to get your views on our plan as well.
Yeah.
As a committee, it'd be quite useful to get some feedback, so we can maybe come back and report back a bit more of what we're planning to do in North Norfolk in particular. It might be useful.
I think that would be appropriate.
So you can see what sort of areas we're focusing on, where we want to put investment. So we can maybe submit a report through the chair in the middle of next year, and then come back and discuss that if that would be useful.
Yeah. Well, I think that would be a good idea, personally.
Yeah, I'm support that.
Okay, well, if we just include that as a recommendation that we review progress in a year, perhaps even 18 months. It depends on how it falls. We need to fit it on our work program as well. So we should keep flexible on that matter for now. But we would like a further progress report in around a year's time. Okay, can I have a proposer and seconder then for that, for Councillor Houser and Councillor Fisher? Can I have a show of hands then, please, to note and to agree that recommendation? Yes, that looks unanimous to me. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, thank you both very much for coming along today. Well, I think we've given it a good session, and we have something to look forward to. And there are certainly some big challenges, as well as some more local challenges that we would like to hear more about in the not too distant future.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, appreciate your time this morning. And as ever, I think most of you have my contact details, but you can get them from the team here. But by all means, get in touch if there's any particular issues you wanted to take further, and we'll happily meet you. And I'm going to see Victoria soon in her parish. But yeah, others were more than welcome to come and speak to you or come and see us, one of our sites. Be more than welcome. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. I think we've got a decision. Do you want to take a break at this point? Or do you want to continue on for a little while? Yeah, I think it's going to take a little while to get through the rest of our agenda. So I suspect we're going to have a break at some stage or other. We can do budget monitoring next if you wish, and then have a break. How do you feel? We'll do budget monitoring. Let's do budget monitoring and then we'll have a break. Okay. So moving on to item 12 then, budget monitoring report for period 6, 23 to 24. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you members for agreeing to have this paper before you take a break. So this report came to Cabinet not so long ago, and there's a slight update that's missing in the executive summary because the pay award was known at that meeting, and Councillor Cushing had quite rightly raised it at the meeting. So the pay award was estimated to have an impact of 120,000, unless Officer Stankley corrects me on that. Thank you very much. So moving quickly to the recommendations. If we look at recommendation 2, I'll come back to recommendation 1 shortly. Recommendation 2, the information you'll find on page 41, 3.12. Recommendation 3 is the addition of the grant received by the government, so it isn't coming from our own reserves, and that you will find the information for that on page 41, 3.13. Recommendation 4 is 42, 3.14. Recommendation 5, and I'm pretty sure that members know how I feel about walls by now. Page 42, 3.15, and recommendation 6 is on page 42, 3.16 to 3.18. The reason that I wanted to come back to recommendation 1, if I could just ask members to turn to page 37 to item 2.8. And I'm not going to take this from Councillor Fredericks at all, because we have got a significant impact on our budget in relation to temporary accommodation. So I won't explain that further. But with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, I ask that Councillor Fredericks would take that particular recommendation as an explanation following me. Are you happy for me to do that? Yep. Councillor Fredericks.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Thank you, Councillor Dixon. We have a temporary accommodation crisis in this nation, in this country, in this district. As you'll see, our normal budget for temporary accommodation is around £700,000 a year. We're looking now at our budget being increased, or our overspend totaling 1.3 million. This is every single pound that you can see there is spent on keeping people safe. We've had a 40% increase this year in homelessness. We have 75 households in temporary accommodation. We have a further 100 or so awaiting decisions to be accepted as homeless. This is not down to finger pointing at vulnerable refugees. This is down to systematic failure of the government to invest in council houses, as were social houses, affordable houses. People come to us out of desperation from domestic abuse situations, which has risen again another 20% this year. And also private rentals coming to an end. The private rental section has been penalised by the legislation, EPC rates, interest rates going sky high. So they're coming out and basically turning their properties into holiday lets, or they're putting them on the open market. This is the biggest crisis next to climate change that we're facing at the moment. We're running out of space to put people. I've just heard news that Liverpool City Council, their budget is usually 250k to spend on temporary accommodation, i.e. bed and breakfast. In the last 3 years, it's turned into £19 million.
Take nothing away from your point. I think we just need to focus on North Norfolk.
Okay, that's fine. I was invited to speak at the Emergency TA Summit a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just going to tell you, this is nationwide. So in North Norfolk, you obviously know that we've been finding pots of money here, there and everywhere to buy homes for temporary accommodation. We're hoping that that will increase to 19 and 23 next year. So we are trying to tackle this as much as we can. And we have our prevention team, our homelessness prevention team, that are basically holding back the waves of more people presenting as homeless. So they talk with landlords, they talk with families, and they're trying to prevent homelessness. So we're doing all we can as a district, but I've got no more rabbits to pull out the hat. There's no more solutions that I can see to this crisis. So we're calling upon the government for financial help for temporary accommodation throughout the districts, throughout the UK. So there is a letter going to the Secretary of State. I don't know who that is this week, but that has been signed by all leaders of councils asking for emergency help. So we wait on that. Thank you.
I think your point is well understood. We appreciate the bigger picture here and how that plays into your current situation. So Councillor Shires.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't have done a better job, so thank you for indulging that. And then the only other thing that I just wanted to mention, not to detract from what Councillor Fredericks has just raised, is last year, the budget last year, the committee may remember where we had the discrepancy with retained business rates, where we found that we had a shortfall in the money that was given back to us. The variance wasn't something that we'd viewed because it's not within our control, unfortunately. So I just want to make members aware that under 3.7 on page 39, there's the explanation again about why we can't be completely assured of retained business rates. So just to make sure that everybody's aware, because I know Councillor Cushion had raised that as well from the previous budget.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions then? Sorry, before we move that, Officer Stankley, would you wish to add anything to what's been said?
Yeah, recommendation one is that you note the report, but also note that officers are taking measures to try and reduce the deficit where we can. We've got a meeting set up, or it is currently being arranged, hopefully, whilst I'm in this meeting, for the assistant directors and finance team to attend to look at the budgets and see where we can actually reduce those savings. And that will take place. I've asked for it to take place within the next 2 to 3 weeks, and that will be the starting point for us looking to reduce the deficit. We will also, I think, look at the savings that we've already achieved on staffing and take those as given, because obviously if the vacancies have already happened, then those budgets are no longer required for the rest of the year. So that is one measure that we'll take straight away. We'll endeavour to look at everywhere we can of reducing the deficit down to the minimum level possible.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Councillor Griffin, Councillor Holiday, Councillor Hanklin, in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I raised this point actually, Officer Stankley, as you know, in the cabinet meeting about the money that we're spending on borrowing, which is 300,000. And the reason for that, I understand, is that the government requested back an overpayment of COVID loans at shorter notice than the council was anticipating. I did ask at the time whether what we're going to do in future in order to make sure we have no repetition of that, because clearly that's effectively £300,000 squandered was the same amount as we would raise in terms of council tax increase on council taxpayers during the course of the year. So are we going to have in place sort of what volume money might we have there for, if you like, ready money, available cash that we could deal with any other things like that? And also, from your experience, are there any other risks that we might have where we might actually be called on to actually pay out money at short notice? Will that influence actually how much money we have, if you might, we'll call it rainy day money, I guess, what most of us would call in personal terms? Thank you.
Yes, we are required to hold a certain level of liquid assets in terms of cash, which we do, and we comply with the right levels. Everything else is tied up in investments which are on call at certain day notice. We can withdraw some of our investments, but then we will lose the interest on those at preferential rates. And the amount that we've lost or had to pay out in interest on borrowing has been offset in part by the amount that we haven't withdrawn from our investments to cover that. But we are looking, and it's on my radar now that I personally will look at anything that we do in terms of borrowing, cash flow forecasts with the officer to make sure that we're borrowing for minimum length of time for periods where we need to take borrowing if we haven't already accessed our investment money. But it is something that we you know, it's more prudent to leave the investments as they are. If we only need to borrow for a week to cover a shortfall, the timing of when we receive our council tax income, business rates income, is unfortunately out of sync with when we have to pay the precept. So there is always, every single month, a short period of time when we're short of money. And that's just the way it is. But we are actively looking at reducing the level of borrowing in the same way that we should be looking at making savings everywhere else.
Thank you very much for that. Can I just have a follow-up question? Because in terms of where you might put that money, I'm just trying to relate it to personal circumstances. So clearly individuals have access to online accounts which will pay interest, may not pay quite as much interest if you put it in for a longer term saving. But in the public sector, is there not facility to invest money on which is effectively accessible but will still get a return on some interest?
Yes, and we already do that. We have money market funds, and you can put money into them and take money out of them in real time, but that doesn't earn the level of interest that the longer term investments achieve. Yeah.
Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One is seems some underspend on staffing, and does that have untoward consequences in terms of productivity and output? And the other question is about the delivery plan. About the delivery plan reserve. It's going down by 27 from 4.32 to 1.43. And I wondered if should be taking some steps about that, because that's a somewhat worrying decline. Thank you.
Who wants to respond?
With regard to savings in employee expenses, a lot of it is due to vacancies, and that is where officers have not had the time to recruit or haven't been successful in recruiting. I have some vacancies in my team where we've gone out to recruit and have not been able to. And yes, it does have an impact on the performance of the team and the delivery of services across the council. I'll just have a look at the level of reserves for you as well.
Councillor Holiday, are you referring to the reserve statement on page 67?
Okay. Yes, we've got the level of reserves being reduced in there from, well, it was balanced at the 1st of the 4th, 22. So we've got the use of those reserves during 22-23, which has already happened, and we are in 23-24 where we've got planned use of those reserves to take them down to 1.8 in as at the end of this financial year. There'll have been planned use of reserves and some unplanned use of reserves. I mean, I think we've said with the playground scheme that we will use the delivery plan reserve because it is there for enabling the delivery of the objectives of the corporate plan, and that is what it's there for. I don't think at this point in time, depending without knowing what the budget position is for 24-25, we wouldn't be planning to make any major contributions to top that reserve up unless we had surplus funds to do that.
So is that a risk to the organisation then, if we're depleting it by doing what we need to do, obviously at our corporate plan delivery, and then we end up with less money and we don't have a mechanism for topping it up?
Can I just ask for a bit of clarification? You are, so obviously the delivery plan reserve is set to, well, it's detailed there to help us achieve the corporate plan. Are you suggesting that there's a risk to the success of the corporate plan if the reserves aren't topped up? Is that what your question is?
Well, my question is can we do what we want to do if we don't have the money to do it? But I may be misunderstanding things completely.
No, that's completely correct. That's completely correct. And in short, if we didn't have the money, then we wouldn't be able to do the things, providing they're outside the scope of the current reserve. But at the moment, we have just done our first year plan. The costings for that will come back overall, and then we're going to look at it on an annual basis. And that's the reason for doing it on an annual basis, is so we can budget accordingly, but also to make sure that we're actually achieving on an annual basis rather than having a large plan over the 4 years.
Mr. Blanche, do you wish to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. So in answer to Councillor Holiday's question, yes, over time, if that delivery plan reserve is utilised, there will be less flexibility and scope in the future. So there is a degree of political choice around the use of that reserve. The reserve has been built up over a number of years from previous year end of year surpluses. This authority under both administrations has been very prudent over many years and has had a very sound financial position. But the context that which we're operating in, as Councillor Frederick has outlined, is changing significantly. And if you look at our core spending power over the last few years, it has reduced significantly. So the flexibility that we have moving forward is likely to be more constrained. So at the present time, the expenditure of £1.2 million from the delivery plan this year, reducing to £424,000 next year, does reduce or limit the capacity and may constrain the ambition to deliver against the corporate plan. And that's something that we have discussed with the Cabinet as the corporate leadership team. You'll recall that the corporate plan was signed off by full council in July, and the delivery plan, or the annual action plan for 24-25 was agreed by Cabinet at the beginning of this month. And that is essentially resourced in terms of those headline actions that the Cabinet would wish the authority to see progress on or deliver, in addition to business as usual core services. Our ability to do that may be constrained by meeting the challenge of the temporary accommodation pressures that we are experiencing at this time. And that's why, without an ability to deliver a balanced budget next year, our ability to deliver at pace against some of those corporate plan ambitions may be reduced in the future. So the answer to your question is yes, over time.
Thank you. Councillor Houston.
Mr. Chairman, yes, just quickly, the revised staffing costs is mentioned several times. Is that what you alluded to earlier?
Yes, the announcement was made just prior to the Cabinet meeting. So we'd missed the deadline for changing the report.
Okay.
The actual impact, as to high level calculation, is that it will be an overall impact of about £120,000 over and above what we've budgeted for. And this is because it's been awarded again at £1,925 per employee. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, sorry, just picking up on Councillor Cushing's point. The Rwanda scheme has been deemed unlawful. So are we expecting that might put more pressure on? Councillor Cushing mentioned anything unforeseen coming towards us. So are we going to be looking at accepting more immigrants into the Norfolk district?
Mr. Blatch.
Yes, whilst we've been in committee this morning, the Supreme Court has confirmed on the BBC News feed that the Rwanda scheme that was promoted by the government is unlawful. Setting aside the uncertainty that's existed around that issue for some time, obviously the government has provided accommodation for large numbers of asylum seekers pending determination of their claims and leave to remain in the UK. There is a regional distribution policy in principle that the government has consulted upon, and we are involved in those discussions as a regional partner through the East of England Local Government Association. Each of the local government regions in the UK has a strategic migration partnership. We don't have any government commissioned hotels with asylum seekers in North Norfolk. We don't have that nature of that bed stock here. And so the relative numbers of asylum seekers that or migrants that we would see come to North Norfolk is very low. So the temporary housing accommodation pressures that Councillor Fredericks has outlined are almost exclusively local people who are seeing their housing tenure position impacted on for other reasons, either relationship breakdown, domestic violence, or the decline in the private rented sector through additional regulatory requirements and return on investment in terms of interest rates. And North Norfolk isn't an area with a large migrant community, and so it's our understanding or belief that it isn't many asylum seekers' location of choice, in that the greater pressure are in metropolitan and urban areas where there is more diverse communities. That isn't to say that in the context of the East of England region as a whole, there isn't some pressure building in terms of placement. We're not able to accommodate an element of our temporary accommodation need within our district. So we are placing people out of district, and that issue is taking place across the region as a whole. And the pressure on temporary accommodation budgets is greatest in Essex and Hertfordshire. It's much greater than here. And that was why the District Council network had this emergency summit, which Councillor Fredericks referred to last week. The government is under pressure to reduce the amount of public money spent on hotels for asylum seekers, and so it has the proposals for that, the barge in Portland Harbour, and large-scale accommodation at former RAF sites at Wethersfield in Essex and Scampton in Lincolnshire. It has given public notice that it wants to reduce the number of hotels before the end of the year. There are also targets set by the Home Office to make determinations on an estimated number of asylum seekers, to give them determination and certainty within a reasonable timescale. And that would increase the numbers who are granted leave to remain. At that point in time, technically, they don't become a responsibility of UK government in terms of meeting their accommodation costs, but those individuals will then be coming out into the community, some of whom will find it difficult to secure accommodation themselves independently, and may then arrive at local authorities under homelessness duties. And so it might be that as local authorities seek to respond to those pressures, they indeed have to then procure hotels or make placements into hotels. But then, under the current position, the duty and responsibility for meeting those costs will rest with local authority council taxpayers. And that is the issue that across political councils of all colours, that is the concern that is now being raised with government through the Secretary of State. And the new housing minister is Lee Rowley, and he was previously the local government minister within the same department. So, you know, but the pressures in North Norfolk are not directly being driven by large numbers of asylum seekers or refugees. It would be wrong to give that impression.
Thank you for that. I just wonder whether sort of second part of your explanation there, that the risk may not be from those two groups, but of course there is this displacement that will likely happen from those areas that are subject to those pressures. And that is where probably our greatest risk is, that there will be that displacement that will ultimately tip us into a more difficult position.
That's correct. That's the regional, that's the consideration being given at a regional level through the Strategic Migration Partnership. So there is proposals for a quota or a distribution, but in reality, we don't know whether that will come to pass here, because many people in the migrant and asylum seeking community would rather be in urban areas rather than rural communities, such that we aren't seeing very significant pressure from those groups in terms of homelessness presentations.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hankin and then Councillor Pepper.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm not sure whether this is the right auditorium, but I'll proceed anyway. Following the planning application to provide mixed use in a number of sort of chalet parks, right? The sales of residential property has been quite significant. Many of those people have decided not to register for the vote, and in turn have not decided to pay council tax. What is the protocol in terms of collecting that council tax on behalf of the council?
It probably is outside of the scope, but I'll take it.
I would offer that to Officer Knight, if that's okay.
Not here for that purpose, I suspect, Officer Knight.
I wasn't here for that question, but I'm happy to answer it. Basically, caravan sites are rated basically from the valuation office, first of all, independently. For those who are not aware, the valuation office are part of HMRC. So they will classify whether it's a business use or a domestic use. And obviously there's a number of services who would be involved in that. Planning, you mentioned, obviously licensing. But ultimately we would bill based on the actual valuation. If we feel a property should change from one type, as in someone's living there as a main home, and we believe they are not registered for council tax, then we report it to the valuation office. That's the right protocol. Information which is passed to us, we'll do that. Ultimately, it's the decision of the valuation office whether that property is classed as council tax or non-domestic rates. But we will bill accordingly. And if someone doesn't pay, then clearly we have the enforcement rights to carry on to take them to court based on the valuation in the list.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Okay. We've strayed somewhat away from the core of the budget monitoring. So, Councillor Fredericks, is yours germane to this, or is it
Oh, it's
taking
very
us further?
germane, Jackson, to this. So yes, I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Blatch. That was an incredibly eloquent way of explaining what the national situation is. In cities, I'm getting word from other leaders that I've been with of councils that the Home Office is actually outbidding district and borough councils on bed and breakfast places. So that's another problem that we're facing. So I'll end it there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Pertinent? Oh, yes, of course. Councillor Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's pertaining to housing again and budget. It's how are we doing with the long-term empty homes, and are we managing to bring any of those back into use to help alleviate the situation and the finances? Thank you.
You want to take that, Councillor Fredericks?
Me again. Thank you very much for your question. I've got some really good news on this. So we've got an empty homes officer who's been working really hard. So I can tell you from April to October, and I'm sure Officer Knights will back me up on this. We've actually managed to bring 92 houses back into circulation in North Norfolk, which is a staggering amount. So that means that obviously people can use those houses, but also we can collect council tax from those houses as well, which is a great win-win. So, you know, congratulations to our Empty Homes officer on that and their hard work, because I think that's just a staggering achievement.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Councillor Fredericks. That really helps. Every little bit, every little drip just makes a difference. And I think that's a valuable input. And, thank you to all officers involved.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. If we're all done then, our recommendations here are set out 1 to 6. Are you comfortable to run with those? And if so, can I have a proposal and a seconder, please? Councillor Fisher, Councillor Hankin, can I have a show of hands to accept those then, please? Thank you. That looks unanimous to me. Thank you very much. Right, okay, back to the clock, so to speak. We've got 2 hopefully not that long items, and then we've got the item 15 in our work programme as well to consider. So I think one way or another, we're going to need a break. And so I'm going to suggest that we have a 5-minute break and that we can reconvene again when the clock reads 4 minutes to 12. Okay, I'll close or adjourn the meeting for now.
Yes, hopefully the report is self-explanatory. It provides an update on the performance to date halfway through the year. It includes, as we can see, an economic forecast and also a forecast of interest rates. They're taken from our Treasury Management Advisors, Link Asset Services. It includes an update on the Treasury Management Strategy, which we're not proposing to make any changes to. The capital position in terms of spending and prudential indicators there, and then also some narrative on the borrowing and our annual investment strategy. I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Questions? Just to bring you up to speed, Councillor Shires, we've had an introduction on the Treasury Management Report from Officer Stangley. Is there anything you want to add? Questions? Are there no questions? If there are no questions, then are you content then to accept the recommendation approval by full council demonstrating compliance with the Prudential Code to ensure adequate monitoring of the capital expenditure plans and treasury management activities, requirement that any proposed changes to the 23-24 prudential indicators are approved by full council. So it's a recommendation to full council, really. Support the cabinet recommendation to full council and approve the treasury management report for mid-year. Can I have a proposer and a seconder then, please? I've got Councillor Boyle and Councillor Ball. Can I have a show of hands then, please? That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on then to item 14, council tax discounts, premiums and determination for 24-25. Councillor Shires.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Officer Knight for the paper. We've spoken about this at length. I just want to touch on recommendation 5, which you'll find the explanation of on page 94 under 4.4, where the costs of this are fully compensated by Norfolk County Council. And then the additional thing that I want to note is the recommendation 9, which is in paragraph 4.3. So that's following the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act that was agreed a few weeks ago. Members who have sat before will note that we had agreed the premium on second homes, but we were awaiting legislation. And that means, unfortunately, we will have to wait another year before we'll see the income from that. But unless I am mistaken, the amount that should see is 550,000 in addition in our budget. But I'll hand over to Officer Knight in case he's got anything that he wishes to add on his very, very detailed paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Just to add, recommendation 8 is also in the same bill, the Levelling Up bill, and that gives us the powers, give members the powers to bring forward the empty homes levy charge, also known as premium, which is 100% additional charge. At the moment, it's for properties that have been empty for 2 years continuous, but we have the option of bringing it forward to 12 months. So when a property meets the 12-month period of being empty, then we can charge the 100% premium instead of the 2-year period. That would be effective from 1st of April 24. Unlike the second homes, which is the government said it's got to be 25, you have to give a year's notice, which is what this paper covers. The empty homes would bring in additional incomes to the council of approximately 68,000. At the moment, for 2-year empty properties that cover that status, we get about 16,000. As the NNDC share the precept, which is 8p in the pound. So that would go up to about 68,000 for next year, which is an additional amount of money. I think the other thing worth saying here with empty properties is it's been shown that by raising and having a premium there is encouraging people to bring properties back into use or to sell them on because they don't want to leave them there and pay the extra charge. So whilst it is enforcement and some customers dislike that, I think we can see our current figures for empty properties generally for the council is better than the national average. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Councillor Holiday.
The second home premium, I had heard at one stage that we were going to be receiving more than that we would receive the entirety of it rather than a percentage. But also, is it going to be ring fenced? Because I'm being questioned on that by my constituents.
Who wants to take that? Mr. Blatch.
Well, unfortunately, the leader of the council isn't in the room at the moment to take that question. So I think the figure that Mr. Knight has shared with you of the 550,000 is the amount of money that would return to North Norfolk District Council in accordance with our share of the collected council tax. So the figure that would be collected overall and be passed to Norfolk County Council, the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and parish councils would mean that that sum was significantly more. I don't know if Mr. Knight has the figure to hand. It is the wish of Councillor Shires is present. My understanding is the wish of the leader of the council, and he has spoken to MP Duncan Baker on this matter, that the money would be, it would be desirable to retain as much of that money as possible in North Norfolk, ring fenced for future social housing provision. But agreement needs to be reached with the leadership of Norfolk County Council and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner if that is to be achieved. I think those conversations, now the legislation has passed, will be progressed with some haste. I mean, we aren't able to obviously introduce the premium until April 2025, but I think those conversations will move forward, and I can't speak for the county council, but the conversations that have been had to date have been broadly positive of the principles involved, but I can't speak about the detail.
Great, thank you. Yes, Officer Knight.
Just following on from the question, we have currently second homes in North Norfolk. This is from figures we picked up last night, so it's very up to date. 4,764 properties. And the gross charge for those properties currently is over 9.3 million. So if we were to take a very rough guide, you could say, well, 100% premium on those properties would double it. But there's a very big caution here. The bill, once it's been got all assent, we haven't been given the details behind it. And so the figures that were quoted several months ago, the 550,000 was very conservative. And also it doesn't take into account what the government might have in the way of exceptions to these premiums. So until we have that detail and we can work out what properties will be disregarded and what properties are included, you know, we'll then be able to give you more accurate estimates. So, you know, you can take two figures, but they are very wide apart at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, you've got the recommendations set out there, 1 to 9. Are you happy then to accept those? Can I have a proposer and a second of them, please? Councillor Boyle and Councillor MacDonald. Can I have a show of hands then to accept those recommendations? Thank you. That's unanimous. Right, okay, thank you for that. Moving on to item 15. Item 15 is the Coast Watch item, North Norfolk Coastal Accelerator Programme. I'm mindful that we've had, I believe, at least one member briefing on this. Is that correct? And we've got quite a comprehensive that briefing, I think, was held by remote means, was it not? Yes. Yeah. And we've got a comprehensive paper before us, and I'm mindful of the clock as well. So I'm not sure how quite you plan to hand this, Officer Goodliff or Councillor Blathwaite, but I think it would be useful if you gave an introduction and perhaps if Officer Goodliff adds anything to what's if he wants to add anything to what's already been presented to us, and then we'll take it from there on questions. Over to you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to say, yes, we have had officer members briefing on this subject. I think it was a very full briefing and very thorough. And if members were unable to watch it at the time, it has been recorded, and I would recommend it for further viewing. The Coastal Protection Accelerator Programme, or Coastwise, is a fantastic example of where North Norfolk is leading, and others will be following. And I think we can all be rightly proud that we were chosen to lead this programme. And it is a recommendation to our officers that they were in position to do this. The recent peer review did find no criticism of any of our coastal engineers, and in fact they called it work of a national importance. So I will leave it at that. I hope that the committee have had time and a very packed programme to be able to read this report. Officer Goodliff has done a tremendous amount of work on it, and I heartily recommend it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, we've had a packed programme today, but I'm sure members will have had the opportunity to read it over the days leading up to this. So I don't think we can claim that we won't have had that opportunity, but okay. Officer Goodliff, would you wish to add anything? Splendid. Okay, well then let's move straight to questions. Questions on this paper? I've got Councillor Fisher.
I'm not sure whether it's entirely on this paper, but it is to do with Coastwise. And after the storms that we've been having in the last few weeks, I'm just wondering if the sandscaping at Bacton is still considered a success and whether it's still doing the job it was designed to do.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I would say that everything up to now, it would suggest that though this isn't Coastwise exactly, that the soundscaping scheme is still standing up and behaving exactly as the experts suggested it would. There are constant surveys and there is a rolling survey goes on all the time to check on on how it is operating. But I would say, though the soundscaping isn't Coastwise, what is important and what is Coastwise is this soundscaping only buys us time. And Coastwise is all about how we use that time and to use it productively and preparing for the worst and hoping for the best, but preparing for the time when the soundscaping will have gone. And we will be looking at what we can do as cliffs erode and our coastal roads. And I don't know if Councillor, if Rob would like to enlighten us further on that.
Yeah, so there's ongoing monitoring with the soundscaping. So the Shared Coastal Partnership East team are working with Bacton Gas Terminal operators to deliver that in partnership. So it's periodically the data collected is analysed. It's functioning well. Obviously, beach levels fluctuate, but I think if we hadn't have done the scheme over the last few years since 2019, since it was implemented, we would have seen many more sort of flooding events and potential damage to the sea defence assets that we do have there. So it was there to buy time, and as Councillor Braithwaite sort of is saying, we now need to use that time, and Coastwise provides us with the opportunity to plan for the future and work with the community to do that. It won't be easy, you know. It's always hard when we're talking about coastal erosion and we're talking about the loss of people's homes in the short, medium and long term, businesses, assets, etc. But if we stick our head in the sand, and excuse the pun, we're not going to be prepared, and we won't have come up with the solutions. And people will still be making decisions, you know, based on thinking that they're going to be protected when the reality is that isn't going to be the case. So very challenging, but we need to do this. And in doing so, we're going to have to take a few risks, you know, do things a bit differently, but also hopefully lead the way and hopefully show the way as a nation, to be able to sort of prepare and adapt moving forward.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. Rob, I listened to your presentation the other day and it was excellent. So thank you very much indeed. I was interested to see the risk register and I wondered if that's going to go to GRAC. Is that what normally happens with risk registers? Yeah.
Corporate risk register goes to GRAC, but if GRAC wants to see the coastwise risk register, it's a £15 million investment or expenditure over 5 years. So it's a legitimate issue for GRAC to be interested in. So we can make those arrangements if that's felt appropriate. I mean, the risk register that Mr. Goodliff shared with you, obviously at your presentation, was for the coastwise project, rather than being a corporate risk. But in terms of deepening that understanding and placing that in context, I'm very happy for it to go to GRAC, if there's a request to do so.
Okay, Councillor Toy.
I guess as a chairman of GRAC, I probably should give some input to that. I think it would be good for us to have a first time look at it and then decide if it's something we need to continue with in a work programme. So if that could be arranged, we have a meeting coming up soon. Thank you.
Thank you. What was the thrust of your question around page 28 and the table and the makeup of that, or? Your mic is off.
Sorry, it's what has been shared with us on page 128. I was wondering if that's what the gist of my question was, if that could go before GRAC.
Okay, but you're content with that, right?
That's brilliant. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Housden.
Thank you. Just going slightly back on the last subject, but risk again. Under the coastwise scheme, will it include potential risk to Norfolk District Council assets, or have I missed something? So in the process of what is required protecting or looking at what's happening to the coastline, are we in the process, are we assessing what might be at risk in context of the council's assets, and is that to figure at some point, or have I missed it in the presentation?
It's a good question, actually. So coastwise, it's focusing on our eroding coast where there's going to be coastal change. So it's not the hold the line or the long-term hold the line areas. So it's where it's eroding. Obviously, in some of those locations, in some of those communities, we do own assets. Car parks is a good example, and it's exactly the sort of thing that we'll need to be considering, sort of when we're having conversations with communities, but also sort of the wider sectors as well. So the answer is yes. I think with coast protection measures, so sea defences, there is the potential also to look at decommissioning in some locations, which again is challenging. It's a long process, which we've obviously got ongoing at the moment, but in some localities that might be necessary as well. Yeah.
So just coming back on that, is that something that stage by stage, as you assess and as this whole project moves forward, you would be able to report to obviously full council, but obviously things that could come forward to various committees and that sort of thing?
Yeah, happy to report however you'd like it to be reported. We'd like to keep everybody updated on this. I'm just going to plug something actually as well. There's a new National Coastal Erosion Risk Mapping project, which is going on at the moment. So we're expecting the outputs from that to be launched publicly next summer. Okay. And obviously, for many years, we've been using the Shoreline Management Plan indicative erosion to look at risk. So if anyone's seen my presentations, you'll often see those sort of erosion risk bands. The new mapping is also going to take forward 2 different climate scenarios as well. I'm trying very hard to get an early look of that once they've got a more finalized version, so that we can do some work to analyze that, to understand the number of assets, number of properties, so that we're on the front foot when that's released. Fingers crossed.
Okay, thank you. Just to pick up on the matter of risk, and for Councillor Toy, really, I wonder whether in the consideration of the overall risk and as they are set out in that table on page 128, I think from my perspective anyway, taking an overview, if you like, of that, I think it warrants some unpicking to understand quite how that's been reached, and also we've got the scores there, but I'm not sure how they're made up in terms of likelihood and impact. And so I wonder if that's something that you might like to carry forward towards GRAC. Otherwise, I think this is what I would call a bit light touch, and it might be light touch might be adequate for overview and scrutiny when risk belongs with GRAC. Yeah, but I'm not sure that I would want to leave it at that.
No, we will look at the whole report and these risk scores, and to see, we're trying to see how that fits in corporately as well, because as was explained, it's a separate kind of risk, but we also need to understand how the risk towards our assets and so the corporate thing. So yes, we will, for want of it sounding like it's a crossover thing, but we will scrutinise this, you know, when it comes to our committee. So, but if you have any specific questions, obviously I'll be pleased to receive those and take those into that committee as well. So
I think that might be a recommendation that we might want to consider, that you at GRAC do take a deeper look at that and satisfy yourselves that that's a picture that we are comfortable with, or that we understand in the first instance, and that we are comfortable with. And then we can take that reassurance from what you would do at GRAC.
I'm happy to take that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Rob would like a.
Could I just say one thing around risk, actually? Yes. I think it's fantastic, actually, that you pick this up and want to explore it further, because I think it's really important to manage risk correctly through a program and a project. Just a little reassurance is this is obviously a cut down version of a much larger risk register. We have, as per the NNDC project management process, we have a governance board, and we the initial risk register done for Coastwise went through the Environment Agency's large project review group, which they actually added a few risks, which was really good. And it since has been reviewed by the Coastwise board as well, through a risk workshop. So we've done a bit more work on that. So I think it'd be a really good thing for GRAC to take that forward, and would obviously share the full risk log with all the scoring matrix, etc., so that you can get full understanding and oversight. So, but thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So just turning then to the recommendation, and in regard to this, our current recommendation states that overview and scrutiny endorses the delivery of Coast Watch, and I think we probably have no difficulties with that, and that we recommend that the risk table on page 128 be the subject of further investigation, scrutiny, if you like, at GRAC. All right. So if that's an amended recommendation that you would support, can I have a proposer and a seconder? I've got Councillor MacDonald and Councillor Fisher. A show of hands then, please, to support that. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Turning then to our next item on the agenda, which is, I believe, the Cabinet Work Programme at item 16. Officer Denny.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just to say that the work programme for Cabinet is relatively light in December, and you will see when we get to the scrutiny work programme, that's because the majority of the budget related finance reports will be going through to scrutiny in December and then to cabinet in January. So you've got managing performance coming through, got delegated decisions, which comes through on a quarterly basis. The Glaven Valley Conservation Aerial Appraisal, which has come through from planning policy. And I think we're just waiting confirmation on whether there will be a property transaction too. So that's the cabinet work programme. And then as you can see, that's very heavy in January, looking at those financial reports. I don't think there's anything else on that at the moment.
Okay, any questions in relation to the cabinet work programme? No? Okay. Moving swiftly on then to the item 17, which is the overview and scrutiny work programme and update.
So as just stated, this is quite heavy in December. And I think because of that, there have been requests to bring forward the local economic strategy and action plan. And I think having a sort of pre-agenda discussion with the chairman, we felt that may sit better in January. I don't know if the committee want to consider that due to your heavy schedule in December, because I think the committee may want some discussion around that.
Sorry, which one was that?
So that is pre-scrutiny, local economic strategy and action.
Oh, yes,
plan.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
They all say pre-scrutiny, so it's got a bit lost in there. Yeah, so that, because you've also got the performance item coming through too, so it's particularly heavy, that session. So it'd be useful to know members' views on whether you're happy to move the economic strategy to January, which is currently a bit lighter.
Yes.
So I think that's, so I can feed that back. And just to let members know that the previous scrutiny officer had contacted the NHS regarding some follow-up to the dental discussion that you had, and I've had a response back from them late yesterday, following up on various questions that were raised at your last meeting. So I will circulate that to members after this meeting. And I think Councillor Boyle just wanted to come in on that as well.
Yes, it probably be opportune moment. I was given 2 questions to take to overview the health overview and scrutiny, and I have responses here. So I don't know if we've got time to quickly say what came back.
And, or do you want me to circulate those two together with the
I
other
think it would be
questions?
useful if they could be circulated so that we can all read them.
Okay, because I did have a recommendation from the information that came back that we might like to think about asking the leader of the council to write to the Cabinet Minister for Public Health in support of school dentistry, because this seemed to be one of the, in answer to what the first question, it seems to be one of the most critical things about prevention. You know, we prevent people getting ill by having inoculations, but we're doing absolutely nothing about young children's mouths, and that seems to be very crucial.
Could you let Officer Denny have what you've got in as a report, if you like, and they can be circulated by email?
Yeah.
Would that be?
No, that's fine. And we can review the actions.
would
Yes, see the best.
Enable us to read those and understand those at our leisure, so to speak. Any other issues on the work programme? I'm just mindful that you mentioned the previous scrutiny officer. My understanding is we have a new scrutiny officer in the offing. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. They've verbally accepted the offer, and the formal offer was sent out to them yesterday. So hopeful that that will all proceed. I'm due to start in January with us, but hoping to attend the December meeting. So hopefully members will get to meet him. His name's Neil White then. So yes, I will be covering in the meantime, but yes, that's the plan. It's all on schedule.
Okay, thank you. There's one other item which I think we need to mention today, because we will need to fit this in. Those of you who will have seen the peer review report will have seen mentions of overview and scrutiny within that report. And clearly there are some follow-up, there's some work that we need to do in order to progress what are recommendations for us to consider. And we need to, I think, create some time in which to do that. And I think we also need to agree an approach by which we follow to do that as well. So I wonder, in terms of the new scrutiny officer coming in, because I think that will be an important consideration, whether or not we could fit in an informal meeting in January. And that would allow us then to develop an approach that we want to follow with regard to that report. Sorry, Councillor Toy, you had a.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, no, it was just part of that, the peer review as well. It said about the crossover between the two committees. So I think it would be wise, if you're comfortable with that, for me to be included with that, with, in fact, some of the committee members are on both anyhow, that we help to draw up those dividing lines as well as part of that informal discussion, at least start it off there. I don't know your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, I just want to really canvass amongst committee members whether that's the kind of approach, whether that's the kind of timescale that you would support, and or if you've got other ideas, then let's have them now, and we can then. But we do need, I think, to schedule some space in the work programme, and January, I think, realistically is. And as I said, the arrival of that the new support officer would be, I think, a consideration to bear in mind, because they will need, I think, to lead us in part through that process as well. Is that something that you would support? Am I getting nods?
Yeah.
Nobody disagrees with that?
No, I think yes, and particularly with the support officer in place, I think that is crucial.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think otherwise I probably would want to try and do something in December, but I'm mindful that December actually is, in working terms, a relatively short month, and we've got a busy meeting that time as well. So I don't think realistically we're going to be able to fit that in prior to January. So if you are content with that, what I would I think do is to probably for next pre-agenda, the vice chair and myself will meet with Emma, and we will work out some timings around what we might be able to fit in January, and perhaps come up with a sort of suggested approach in some more detail. If you're comfortable with that, then we'll leave it at that point. So are you happy then to accept the work programme with the mentions that have been made? Okay. Thank you. I'll have a show of hands on that then, because the sun is in my eyes at the moment. Right. Okay. Thank you. That's fine. Right. Okay. That's the last item on our agenda. We don't have any private business, so I will formally close the meeting, and thank you all for your attendance and your input today.